Welcome to Framework. I'm John, one of the hosts of Framework. With me, as always, the other host of Framework. Al, how are you this fine morning?
Oh, I'm all right. Fresh off of watching the finale of The Penguin.
I didn't watch The Penguin. I am fresh off of watching the finale of Agatha All Along.
I did not watch that show. That comic book streaming spin-off series.
Yes, of a sort of second-tier villain. Well, no, I guess Agatha Harkness is more of a third-tier villain, if in fact she's a villain. Well, she is in the show, not in the comics. And they're both weird shows about secondary characters.
Whether Agatha is third tier or fourth tier, is Penguin a first tier villain, or is the first tier villain basically just the Joker?
I think Penguin is definitely second tier. I mean, he's notable, and I think if you went back maybe 50 years, you could say the Penguin occupies the same tier. But, you know, the march of history has proven the Joker to be the more interesting and popular villain. He might be only top tier Batman villain because of the status he possesses. Maybe Penguin has increased in his profile as of now because this show was successful, at least from what I hear.
Well, I think for a long time it was like really the Adam West Batman movie set the top tier by like the big premise of this movie, even though it's the Adam West series, is it's the team up of all the major villains, which it was the big four in that case was the Joker, Catwoman, Riddler, and Penguin. Probably as due much to the actors they got for those and their availability as anything. But then, you know, the Burton films sort of reified that by starting with Joker and then going to Catwoman, Penguin. And then we got the Riddler in the next one.
Yeah.
And the Nolan movies have scrambled that a bit. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say they made Scarecrow a top tier villain.
Right. I would say, yeah, like, I don't know, in the last 20 years or so, we've kind of decided culturally that the Joker is the most important Batman villain, the arch nemesis, if you will. And everyone else is kind of, you know, well, I guess going for second place. Catwoman at this point is not considered a villain in the way she would have been back then.
Sure.
You know, I don't know. The Riddler, I guess, is moving up because of the Matt Reeves film. Maybe the Penguin is too now. But he wasn't even deemed useful for the Nolan verse or the Snyderverse, come to think of it. So, you know, I don't know. It's fluid, and there's always just sort of a desire to try new things, I guess, as well. You know, well, what if we did a Scarecrow movie or what have you? So, you know, perhaps we're back around to the Penguin now. Well, clearly we are.
There's also not even on the comic book front I don't know of the Penguin being central to any of the major Batman arcs. I'm not a big Batman reader, but I'm aware of the premises and just of Nightfall and No Man's Land and some of these other ones. But you know, The Long Halloween I've read, and the Penguin's in there, but he's not central to it. And the Riddler's a joke in that one. Like the Riddler and Penguin are the ones that can be major Batman villains or jokes that the other villains sort of kick around. To establish that they're the serious ones.
Yeah. Let's see. There was, of course, the Gotham television show had the Penguin centrally positioned in it. That's some trash. You got to be like deep in on Batman to be conversant in the Gotham show. But you know, he's always been in the mix, I suppose. I think aside from the Tim Burton version, he's always kind of a gangster capo of sorts, you know, that fits into that world, that aspect of the Batman villainy. You know, the Sal Maroni crime family stuff, Falcone as well. That whole aspect of it, that's sort of a, you know, I guess, I mean, people are saying that the Penguin was like, well, it's like the Sopranos, and you know, it's based on those crime families, which, you know, I probably have a clearer understanding of than real life American crime families.
Yeah, well, probably more interesting in their operations.
Sure.
The Sopranos is definitely a touchstone for the Penguin show, and because
as a person who didn't watch that show, I have to ask that's probably bullshit, right? I'm sure this show resembles The Sopranos in almost no way, other than he kind of looks and sounds like Tony Soprano.
That's kind of a big way. Like, it's the title character, and
Right.
it's very interested in the Penguin's mommy issues.
Okay. Okay.
So there is that, I suppose.
But it's not
And
the sort of episodic amble through his life and times. It's more of it's plot driven, I'm sure.
it is more plot driven than Sopranos. Yes, that is. I mean, that feels like the least you could say. Even the stuff that wanted to rip off the Sopranos most directly, the thing that they were, if they're going to add an innovation, it was going to be to make it more serialized and more plot driven.
Right.
If they weren't adding Batman and the Riddler to the mix. And people are pretty positive on it, I guess people were pretty positive on Matt Reeves the Batman, and I am a bit less so, just because I have a bit less time for or patience for the grim and gritty superhero stuff than I might have when I was younger. On the other hand, there was nothing else on TV lately that it felt like, so I just ended up watching all this. It's a fascinating central performance by Colin Farrell under this mountain of prosthetics. It is a really impressive. It's a monumental in the pointlessness of having him do this, as opposed to just there are chubby middle-aged character actors out there that are good.
Right. I did get that vibe from the movie. I like him in the movie, but I'm also I didn't see Colin Farrell in it at all. I was just like,
Right.
this is not him, really. It's something else, and that's impressive in its way, but it's also sort of, like you say, pointless. It reminds me of casting James Woods in Ghosts of Mississippi to play a character that spends 90% of the film in old age makeup as like a 75-year-old man. Woods is like 40 years old, and it's just a stunt, and it's distancing, you know?
It reminds me of The Irishman.
Oh boy. Well, that's a more up-to-date reference. Well done. Okay.
Yeah. Well, just like this came up recently. I just randomly was flipping through Instagram Reels or something, and it was a scene from The Irishman was just in there, and I was like, maybe it's about time for me to revisit this. And I was struck by how even like Stephen Graham, who was not being aged up or down or whatever, still had this sheen of digital makeup on him that looked horrible. Made him look worse than Pacino. I don't know if that was intentional to make Pacino look better sitting next to him, but I what is going on here? And that was my takeaway with The Irishman a lot. It was not beyond just the de-aging. There's people in there not giving bad performances, but it's like, why you're burying, Herc from The Wire under all these prosthetics so he can play an Italian mobster who's just like fatter than him, I guess, in real life. And it's like, but there are fat Italian guys out there. He's not doing a bad job, but you don't need to go to this effort to include him. He's not bringing that much value to the table. That's putting aside all the de-aging crap.
I mean, is there value in just the high wire act of Farrell doing this? I mean, he's, he was very good in the film, and everyone says he's wonderful in this show, and he's always been a great actor. I think he's kind of hit a new stride in his career too, as a middle-aged guy. He's very good, and I think the cultural appeal of Colin Farrell is probably at a high tide right now. Like, he's never been more popular between like this and Banshees of Inisherin, and he's just a guy everyone likes right now.
You could give him a character actor role that doesn't require him to be done up like that. I think you should leave sketch where he's got too much shit on him.
Does it work though? I mean,
mostly, but when it works, is you don't notice it in the high. You forget about the high wire act,
right.
And then, but you always the makeup is still significant enough, as well done as it's done. You're always brought back to it at some point, and so that I don't know. I don't think that it's worth the squeeze there, even as it's maybe some of the better stuff in the series is his performance. This ties in my other thing about the Penguin is that it's a spinoff of you've heard of the Batman.
Yes, we spoke on this. Yes,
he's a strong gentleman who fights crime nocturnally, and so it's a spin-off of this movie, and the stuff in this show that works the best is when you kind of forget that this is tied to a bunch of comic book shit. And it's just like, okay, we're doing a gangster show in a dirty kind of realistic city, and then you're reminded that it's Gotham, and Mr. Freeze might be around the corner or something. And whenever you are reminded of that, or whenever I'm reminded of that, it is jarring and pulls me out. And it's the connections to the broader franchise seem to be a negative rather than a positive to me.
That sounds similar to the Joker films, I suppose. in that it's this pastiche of Scorsese. With Joaquin Phoenix doing, a loser incel violent man performance that is very good and, reminds you of, of young De Niro and all the things it's supposed to remind you of. And then, every 10 minutes, you got to talk about Wayne Enterprises. And
right. You're like, oh, right. This is not King of Comedy.
Like, right. And it's like, right. Okay. And it's kind of an ill match in some ways, but like financially, it's not
obviously commercially viable.
Yeah,
to do it.
People want that, so fair enough.
It's been striking to me, and gosh, the other thing that I was watching recently was rewatching Andor, which similarly, like the best stuff about that show exists really outside of its connection to Star Wars, and I'll go for these stretches of kind of forgetting that this is not just a sci-fi political thriller, and then a Wookiee walked by in the background or whatever, something that jars me back into, oh yeah, this is technically related to Star Wars. And those moments almost like they tickle me more. And I'm like impressed by, wow, you did all this in Star Wars. And then when I'm pulled back into reminding, oh, this is the Batman stuff with the Penguin, I'm like, yeah, fucking Batman stuff, right?
Well, Andor is just really incredibly well handled in general. I think if you were doing, perhaps a coffee table drama in the Star Wars universe, then, any time the Jedi came up, it would be distracting. It would pull you out of it. Most things being equal. Andor's, I think the farther we get from it, it is even more impressive and kind of unusual in retrospect. Just what a achievement that is. Especially because we have so many versions of it that are not as good. Like I assume,
and not even. Calling them versions of that is they're versions of Star Wars streaming stuff. It's not they have not attempted to follow up on anything Andor did differently or well.
No, but I think the Penguin is doing a similar thing, sort of.
I think it thinks it is. I'm not sure if it's really hitting that mark. I don't know if it's expanding the tonality or the brand in the same way that Andor succeeds at there. Because it is still very much in the, bleak tone of the Reeves film.
Mm-hmm. I think that's why I didn't watch it is, twofold, but they're both related to the Reeves film, which is, first off, I kind of figured I would probably have to rewatch that, a film I've only watched once, and it's 3 hours long. And that's my big complaint about it, is it's just too goddamn long. So I didn't do that. Apparently I don't need to, but still, I'm kind of OCD really. In that way.
You really don't.
The other part is, the world of the Reeves film, I've been there, done this quality for me. Like I was kind of just like, yeah, it's another dark Batman, it's more dark Batman, more like very serious Batman. And I'm kind of just like, I feel there's not a lot of innovation here. This is perhaps for a younger generation. This is more important than it was for me, but I'm kind of over this at this point. Which is not to say I couldn't be won over, but man, we've got a lot of goddamn Batman. We had an Alfred show. It's
that is inexcusable.
Yeah,
like the Gotham show I gave up on the first season.
That hurt the brand a lot for me, that one. Yeah.
Did it? Oh. It went on for quite a while, so somebody must have been watching it. But
yeah,
the premise there is not that bad, I don't think. It is sort of Garfield without Garfield, I guess. It's or maybe a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern sort of thing where, the lack of Batman is palpable in some way, but it allows for playing.
Gotham actually had Batman as a character, though. Like, he was young Bruce Wayne as a child. Yeah. And he was a regular cast member, so we had to continue following the story of young Bruce Wayne around. And it actually screws up the show, because then you're just like, well, what now? All these characters are going to be in their 50s when Batman's beating them up. It's
exactly.
It was very world breaking. I think the smart thing they should have done on Gotham is, it should open with the famous Wayne murder and Bruce dies too. I think that is how you start that show. And then you're like, uh-oh, no Batman. What now? In this alt universe. Probably a rough thing to start a kid show with, but
yeah, I don't remember it being that. It was a network show.
Yeah.
Well, by contrast with the Penguin, I think it's just the Penguin also has a notable absence of Batman, but it doesn't have even that, like, it's not built into the premise. He is just not paying attention to this increasingly violent and large scale mob war for reasons that we are never privy to. And I mean, it is a damned if you do, damned if you don't thing, because you can't have Batman in this show.
Are they talking about him? Is it like,
Nope.
oh, we want to pass off the bat? None of that kind of stuff? Or is it just not mentioned?
The bat signal shows up in the last shot of the series, but
that's it? Jeez.
That's pretty much it. They barely mention the Riddler once. And again, like, I don't know if there's a clean way through that, because you don't want it to be a fully Poochie thing where everybody's just asking where's Poochie whenever he's not on screen. And this needs to be its own thing, and you can't have Pattinson in there for whatever reasons, but contractual or whatever. But it seems like more of a hindrance. Whereas Gotham, at least, like it's built into the premise. We're not having Batman here anytime soon. Whereas it's built in this premise. He's right around the corner somewhere. And that makes the absence more frustrating in some ways.
Well, that is always going to be the problem with these connected universe shows, when you get very large, world-changing events that go down. You're kind of like, so the Superman, who, the superhero who can fly, and he's just sitting this one out. Is that what's going on? I mean, that was certainly a thing with WandaVision when we, as we talk about Agatha all along, that'll come up a little. Is like, so just no one was paying attention, huh, to the Westview gigantic magic hex thing going on. Not even Doctor Strange, who is theoretically across the river. It's. But I don't care. I don't really care.
I don't care. And I think that one way the Marvel Universe benefits from that is that it had, by the time WandaVision's rolled around, built up such a big and expansive and weird cartoon world that it's not hard to know prize into, they're busy with the other dimensional anomaly on like the other side of the bridge.
I believe Captain Marvel says that a few times in those Endgame films, where she's like, I got to go deal with another planet now. Oh, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can accept that the Reeves Batman universe is still too small for that. Like, this is entirely Batman's purview. It's the mob families that he was fighting in the movie now fighting each other and blowing each other up and all this stuff. Like, as you get into a more grounded and less cartoon universe, I think those explanations are then required to be more elaborate and more believable. Whereas with Marvel, you get to shrug more.
I suppose that's true.
But does Agatha have these issues? I mean, are you
not really
wondering where X, Y, or Z person is?
No, it's a lot more hermetic. The world is closed. They're in most of the show takes place in a sort of a magic universe, I guess you'd say, a magical realm.
WandaVision.
Even more explicit. It's not like it's like they go through a portal and are no longer on Earth for most of the show.
Sure. I mean, Loki seemed that way too. Is that they were spending some time in alternate realities and blah blah. I mean, I guess, multiverse. Explicitly
outside of time in Loki. So that there's ways around it, and this is how they write comics. This is not uncommon in the denser sort of less read issues of the larger Marvel universe, that you're doing stuff that it takes place. Are we transitioning here to Agatha? Are we done with? I mean, we didn't mention Christina Milioti, who everyone loves in the Penguin. I'm sure I would like her.
We can circle back to that, but we're getting into Agatha now, and maybe that we can compare that with the Catherine Hahn character and
sure enough
performance in a way. But but you're talking about with this sort of being the life cycle of comics, though. It's also kind of the death cycle of comics in a way. It's the thing that makes them impenetrable to normies, and a lot of times not very good. Like, it's maybe not an aspect of comics that need to be embraced wholeheartedly for the screen.
It is interesting that Marvel, like, seemingly intentionally steered right into the same problems they had in print media 30 years ago. That seems to be like the basis of the entire the business model, I guess, of their streaming shows and output is no, we're just going to make it weirder and more complicated and more niche. And I mean, it's good in a sense. Like Agatha is actually quite a hit for them, and a big part of that is because they spent a lot less money on it than they did on other shows. Like the She-Hulk thing was, they spent like $200 million to do that. Agatha was like a $30 million show, so it is inherently way more successful for them before anyone even saw it. Basically, just because they kept cost in proper proportion, which is appropriate for an Agatha Harkness show.
That is so weird to me because in my mind's eye, when I cast back to She-Hulk, it is not a good or expensive looking show.
She's a CGI character every scene.
Yeah, every single the main character being covered in constantly. But
and they had to like rush it to get it done, so they're paying wild overtime to overworked, sad, special effects employees. That was a whole drama, and you just don't have to do all that shit with other characters, and maybe you don't greenlight that show going forward. They didn't, because it was just, and it's not because of any backlash. It's because it was too fucking expensive and too work intensive and didn't really, it's on a streaming network, so it's hard to quantify how much money it actually made. So,
Yeah. I mean,
pretty obvious in retrospect.
Yeah. I think the backlash is a factor too, but the budget is always going to be the trump card there. That, I'm still waiting for the announcement that they're just going to shelf the second season of Andor for no reason.
It's shot.
Reception was good.
They have made it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time. But even though the reception to that was good, if the number that doesn't translate to whatever streaming number they need to hit for their opaque metrics, then they're not going to keep something around just because it's good, just because it's well liked by a small fan base. It's the budget is going to be the rating factor.
Well, I think Andor is in that position a little bit. Like that's their prestige. It's Star Wars, such as it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's getting them good write-ups, and people like it, and people want to, even if it's not the most successful, it isn't as successful as the others. But
I think that I've seen over more recently a headline or two about how it actually it's been a slow burner performer for them. That it's like lingered around the top 10 of their streaming shows, even over a year later, when these things typically just have their week and then they're gone.
Yeah. And makes sense.
Again, who knows if that means anything? Like, this is because we're talking about streaming platforms now, which is they are kind of tech platforms as much as they are studios. And this ties back to the comic book stuff we're talking about, in a way that there is the enshittification process around tech. There seems to be one around comic book writing too. And you get tight, like, success does not breed success necessarily in some of these fields. It's too easy to draw the wrong lessons from it, and to take a thing that works because it's easy and accessible, and blow it up and make it less easy and less accessible over time.
It's the sort of thing that would just obviously have to happen at first, when the floodgates opened. Like, of course we're going to do this in the stupidest way right out the gate, and then we'll have to learn lessons from that, or studios will have to learn lessons from it. We'll see.
What other lesson would you learn from the success of the original Avengers? Like, of course you're going to expand as long as that works, and it works through Endgame pretty much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I kind of feel like they're probably going to be on the upswing. I think it's going to be peaks and valleys, and this thing's going to continue on for a while. That's my guess. They're going to make a bunch of X-Men movies. There's going to be another 10 years of these things, of X-Men and such, and Fantastic Fours and what have you. We're not out of the woods. I don't think they'll ever hit the sort of massive level of success and approval that the Infinity War Endgame kind of brought them to. That
probably
Everest.
Shouldn't be the metric.
Yeah.
By any reasonable standard. But of course it is going to be, because it's measurable in a way. But we're also, the X-Men are coming, but also we're not that far off from the last time the X-Men series tied itself into knots and lost the audience thread,
Well, and I think that's why it probably has a ceiling, I think there's a good chance it succeeds in the sense, in the about as much as the DC EU. You know, like it's gonna make some money. It's gonna hit, you know, some opening weekends, but ultimately, you know, and hopefully it won't be as just creatively bankrupt as those, but it will kind of just be stuff that audiences are very familiar with. And so I think it's going to just be kind of, you know, more of the same. We're going to hit our marks and not overwhelm or excite anybody. And yeah, there probably will be a new thing eventually within the next decade that becomes popular in its, in just sort of the rut of superhero warmed over repetition. I don't know. One hopes, but
sure.
But it's not going anywhere.
Where does Agatha fit into this? Is it a peak? Is it a valley? Is it an aberration?
Well,
does it provide any roadmap forward?
I would say no there. This is very much its own thing. Well, unless the thing is make these cheap and, you know, kind of feel free to experiment a little, and you might be surprised with the results, I guess. That might be the lesson of Agatha. The weird thing about it for me was that it actually reignited my interest in this corner of the Marvel universe. So I actually kind of want to see more of the Wanda Maximoff and her extended family stories continuing on. And I want to see more stuff about witches in the MCU, which I never would have guessed would be the case.
Do Wanda or Vision show up in this?
No.
Did anybody I've seen on screen previously that shows
up? Yes. Played by a different actor. I'm just going to spoil this for you. If you want to watch Agatha,
like, reveal at the end or something.
There's plenty of big reveals, actually. There's a lot going on in this, but I'm going to give you the sort of the mid-season one, I guess. And
sure.
And yeah, but you know, spoilers for Agatha going forward here. One of Wanda's kids from the Westview. She had the magic kids. You remember them? She created them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, I've seen them on screen before, but I don't give a shit about spoiling this. I don't care
exactly.
About
this is why I don't mind saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, these figments of her imagination came that she was then trying to search for in the multiverse of madness, of course. These characters, well, one of them, the other is not in it. One of them appears as a teenager. And this is there is mystery about who this character is throughout the first half of the series. And then it is revealed that, yeah, it's actually one of Wanda's imaginary kids. And it's got a pretty good explanation of why he's there. It's very comic booky, which is that when the
explanation is magic, I would assume.
Of course, yes. When the thing ended, when the big red hexagon exploded at the end of WandaVision, and all the imaginary stuff kind of dissipated into the atmosphere, including her kids, there was a shockwave. And the shockwave, kind of went out to the nearby areas and knocked into a car that was driving down the road with a suburban family in it. The kid, like a little 13-year-old kid on his way home from a bar mitzvah, knocked unconscious, actually killed in this car accident. The magic consciousness of the kid winds up in that vessel, and he wakes up and he's the child of this family. And in no memory he remembers being Wanda's kid and not this other family's kid. So he basically takes over the body of a random bystander. Very, very Wanda-ish. And
kind of a Starman.
Kind of a Starman. Mm-hmm.
But worse because they killed a child.
Well, it is kind of a dark show, actually. It's probably the darkest of the Marvel shows I've seen on Disney Plus, now that I think about it. Is that right? Yeah.
I don't know. What's the competition? Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, they don't really do
Invasion?
that. You'd have to tell me because I didn't see it. But
I'm trying to remember if I finished that one.
I doubt it. Everyone hated it.
It was bad. Yeah, it was real bad.
Yeah, I mean, this is the character the story turns on, essentially. Wiccan is, his superhero name. I forget his character's name. Billy or Tommy or something like that. So I don't know if that is enticing in any way, but it's a decent reveal, I think, because this is very much a sequel to WandaVision. It is based on the events of it. It is mostly about, what happened there and the fallout of it for Agatha and for this kid. They're the two main characters. So, it is a direct sequel to WandaVision. without Wanda or Vision in it.
No, I'm sorry to say that Wiccan is not a draw for me whatsoever.
No, it wasn't for me. They didn't sell it on Wiccan, but WandaVision was apparently their most successful MCU show. So they're selling it on that a bit.
And Catherine Hahn was sort of a breakout there. It was something that people liked about that, including me. I would say, she was a highlight there. So giving her own show, not a bad idea on its own merits. Giving
that character
villain their own show or movie is a thing that I am not as into. I don't think it's really worked for me yet fully, but I also haven't given the Joaquin Phoenix Jokers a chance or anything because I'm just disinterested in the premise to a degree.
Well, I mean, I was surprised to find that she's still a villain in this, in Agatha all along. She is a villain protagonist. And it seems like there would have been flexibility to make her more of an anti-hero, a more relatable character. And they did not go that route. I mean, even the comic book version of Agatha Harkness is not actually a villain. She's just sort of a mentor figure, really, I guess an anti-hero, but no, this version of the character is actually evil. and in fact is sort of like an ageless serial killer. When you finally figure out her whole deal. Yeah.
All right. Maybe you're pulling me around a little bit.
Well, if you like Catherine Hahn in this role, that's the reason to watch Agatha all along. I mean, there's some fun comic book stuff in there, but they really let her go for it. This is a fun villain performance, and they give her fun shit to do. There's a lot of crazy things that is asked of her. It's kind of cool that she just signed on to play this, a comic book witch in a franchise television show. It's like 5 years ago, and now she's got to do all the crazy stuff this asks of her. There are a lot of weird things that she gets to do, and some of it is really crazy and really bizarre. I don't want to get into the deep spoilers on it exactly in case anyone cares, but some of it's just silly. Like okay, now you're doing a glam rock music number, in this episode. Just kind of stuff that comes out of nowhere. But it's a lot more asked of her than I expected. And it's a much more interesting character than I expected. So,
is there a conceit a la WandaVision for like things like a glam rock musical?
Okay. Yeah. It's, the basic premise is that, Wanda died. I'm not going to give you the whole breakdown. Essentially what they're doing is, Agatha gathers a coven together to go down a mythical path called the Witch's Road, which is, you require a coven of witches, so the legend says, to complete a series of tasks it's kind of reminiscent of like the Yellow Brick Road, through a fantasy world. And at the end, if you successfully complete the Witch's Road, you gain access to your heart's desire. Be that, magic powers or bringing somebody back from the dead or, et cetera, et cetera. You get your wish if you go through the trials on the magic road. And,
okay.
That's the premise. Mm-hmm.
And there's like different stages to the trials that are at different genres of.
You got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right. So she's doing a Dragon Slayer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you agree? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Essentially.
That's a structure.
It is definitely a structure. This is a show that, this actually is a mystery box show, if you can believe it. It is, it's full on like a Lost kind of thing, except it doesn't tell you that explicitly. It kind of presents what it doesn't like have you guessing necessarily. I mean, there's some mysteries, but mostly it like in the last, I would say 2 episodes, it kind of changes everything it turns on a couple of twists that you're just like, oh, that explain the whole show, and kind of any issues you might have had are now recontextualized, and you're like, oh, I see why that was now. And it actually does this very successfully. Makes the first half of the show a little bit hodgepodge, maybe, you're kind of like, that's a weird reaction. Why is she doing that? Kind of moments like that. And I initially thought it was just sort of hastily written and not thought out, but it's actually a really, really thought out show. I think I don't know. I feel like I'm giving you I'm I'm coming out as very into this, but it was a little rough going for the first half just because I was kind of confused by it. But I think it does resolve in a good way.
The mystery box stuff, making it sort of a Sixth Sense or a Usual Suspects thing or whatever, like that. It's a fine line to walk because, especially in a serialized show that's stretched out over weeks, like the weirdness that is explained away at the end can't be stuff that's like driving you crazy throughout the opening parts of it.
It's not even announced as a mystery or a hidden thing. You're not even thinking of it in those terms. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's probably a better way of doing it, I would think. But so I guess the other question I have here is how much room does Catherine Hahn have to cook in this?
Quite a bit. Although, again, it's a thing where, for, I would say, at least half the show, you don't know what she's playing. Like she has information that you don't have. And it makes her decisions and the things she's doing seem illogical or stupid in sometimes. And you're like, why is she doing that? This character is poorly written. It's not, but it doesn't, it just seems that way at first.
I think she's a pretty good performer actually to pull that off.
Yes. She's the best thing the show has going for it. And it has some other good actors too. Aubrey Plaza is in it. Patti LuPone is in it. They're great in it. It's the whole cast is pretty strong.
Well, I guess maybe that ties back to the Penguin. The best thing the Penguin has going for it is Kristen Milioti as the primary villain. I guess the antagonist you'd call her, I suppose, in this case, because you're not, for as much as this show is about the Penguin and getting into his backstory and his mommy issues or whatever, you're not going to come out of it liking that, like sympathizing with that character. He's
interesting.
He's a bad guy.
Are we rooting for him against Christine Milioti? I would think that'd be a tall order because she's quite likable.
Well, I'm not entirely sure actually. I feel like we're kind of supposed to be just by him being
Colin Farrell
structured as the protagonist. Well, but he's not. He's Oz Cobb. He's under this mountainous shit,
Yeah.
So, but she is a much more. It's not really about likability. She's not a nice lady or anything, but she is a much more dynamic character. She's, a character name that comes from the comic books, but the characterization on the show has nothing to do with the character as she appears in The Long Halloween. And
right.
Because of that, it's much more interesting. Her story is not one. I mean, there's still the constraints of this is, I guess it's not technically a prequel. It's a spinoff, but it still has the feel of prequelness because we have to start with, we're so familiar with Batman mythos that we kind of know the trajectory that the Penguin has to be on here for the mainline movie series to work properly.
Yeah.
And in the whole Falcones and the Maronis, they are sort of prequel villains, right? Like it feels like, I don't know this for a fact because my comic book history is not that tight, but I believe they're only introduced in like comic book stories that were written as prequel stories, as, year one stories, as, the origin stories for Batman.
My impression is that they come off generally as they do in the Nolan films, which are sort of like table stakes villains that that they kind of just represent the general rot of Gotham before the more flamboyant name villains show up, to actually be the central antagonists of the story. They're sort of background secondary villains that are that supply movie.
What that
pieces.
gives them the prequel feel is that they're there to provide origin stories for the villains, for how the Penguin and the Joker took over everything.
Yes,
that's always how they've always struck me, and so that is a problem for the Penguin show because it feels like a prequel even when it's technically not, and like these things are fated. Like it does give me at least some rooting interest with her because I know she can't possibly win, but I'm kind of pulling for her. But she also is less constrained by canon, so she can do weirder things and make different moves and surprise me more. She's also just a very live wire performer, which is nice. But also, the feeling of, I know that the Penguin show can't end with the Penguin losing to Sophia Falcone and Sal Maroni. Sam Mooney played by Clancy Brown, by the way.
He's an actor with a lot of history and comic book stuff, I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, but just and villainy. He's the Kurgan for fuck's sake. That's a knock I have against this. Actually, it's kind of a wasted Clancy Brown villain performance, which is a paddleable offense in my opinion. I mean, he did the voice for Lex Luthor on the Justice League, didn't he?
Still the best Luthor. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great voice.
By a lot.
So it is disappointing to see him brought into the DCEU, whatever, the Reeves verse, and be put in the role of the Washington Generals of gangsters.
He is in his 70s now. He's not going to come out and play, live action Lex Luthor in the new ones.
I guess I don't want that necessarily.
He's an older guy at this point. I mean, I guess you could have him voice Darkseid or something like that, but you might not see Darkseid for a while.
Fair enough. I mean, whatever. I guess
it's a tip of the cap. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. But the Christopher Lee performance is the highlight of the show, I would say.
This is what I've heard. I'm almost surprised to hear I guess that they are in opposition. I mean, in what I've gleaned from just the show itself, if I had to guess what the Penguin was about, it would have been the two of them working together in some fashion or another. They
team up in the early going, but the proverbial bomb is under the table right off the bat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The Penguin murders her brother in the cold open of the first episode.
Okay, fair enough.
So,
fair enough.
You're never fooled into thinking that this alliance is going to last.
Sure.
I don't think the show's even making that ask of you to buy that. So yeah, they are eventually at odds, and she's just fantastic. I highlight the show. I now kind of hoped they would find a role for her in the movies, but it doesn't seem like the series is designed with that in mind.
Well, that's always tough to be just creating a larger extended universe. I mean, this has been Marvel's problem, honestly. It's you're going to want to know about Ironheart, for the movies going forward. No, people don't want to know about that. They prefer not to. It was quite an ask of them already to know about Ant-Man, and you're lucky it worked that time. So, let's not keep adding people here.
But you do want to make room for when they actually do want to see more of Agatha.
That's true. But I mean, Agatha is also, you're going to put her in an inexpensive television show, not in Avengers Doomsday, or who knows? Right. Maybe it'll be there. Who can say? I mean, I think they will probably have to. They've left a lot of dangling threads with these characters. They kind of have to come back to them in some fashion or another at this point. So we'll see.
Well, they can and they don't have to because the Marvel universe is so much more expansive. That's the problem. The Reeves verse is still so small and insular that there is not as much room to slot in an additional appearance from Sophia Falcone if it came to that.
No, that's true. And it's also a universe within a universe at this point that is separate from that new universe that is gearing up, which will presumably have its own Batman and Penguin. Presumably.
Right. This, we are the target market for this stuff, but it feels like increasingly a lot to ask.
I think we're aging out of the target, honestly. I think me and you, with our children and such, we're beginning to lose interest to these people. I think we are.
Maybe.
Well, they'll maintain us as long as they can, but they're going for our kids next. That's
I think that actually, going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, I think that would be a sign of greater health of this endeavor going forward if I were more confident that was the case. Yeah, right. They should be moving past us. I worry that the 40-something comic nerd is still too much of a backbone of all of American pop culture.
I mean, you're right. I think that they're going to have to move past us, though, right? Ultimately, I don't know. Are we going to is that what our generation's legacy is going to be? The way the boomers just had that vice grip of control long after their time? Is that just going to be? It's going to be us have the same thing, but it'll only apply to pop culture entertainment,
to superhero shit. Movies.
Yeah, just going to keep remaking Back to the Future and shit like that forever because of us. It'll be like our Ready Player One future.
No, I think it's Sucker for Ready Player One was actually one of the most prophetic pieces of culture about actual
less
futurism.
than zero possibility of that. Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, I think maybe for another 5 or 10 years, but I don't think the vice grip lasts into our 80s and 90s the way it does with the boomers.
We'll see.
I think this turnover on this stuff's a bit faster. I mean, this just
people would need new ideas, though. That's the thing. That remains theoretical. Yeah.
Okay, that was a nice positive note to end on.
Should I watch The Penguin?
It all depends on your interest level in the Reeveverse. I think for someone like me that was pretty cool on the whole thing, it was not entirely necessary. Although I did find something to latch on to at least. But I don't think there's anything here that you will need to know for the Batman Part 2 that can't be, done in a quick thing of Alfred looking over Bruce's shoulder and at some headline about, the Penguin taking over crime families and being like, oh, Mr. Kolb sure has been busy. Like,
I could see that. Okay. Yeah.
That's all you need for continuity purposes.
Gotcha. All right. Sounds good.
But if you want to see Colin Farrell stretch himself, I suppose.
I'm kind of down with that. I mean, I like the whole aesthetic. It's just sort of, it's not moving me on its own. This is actually like the exact amount of kind of like mid 3.5 out of 5 star kind of response that puts me in a spot where I can't quite write off the Penguin, but I'm also not jumping at the chance to watch it. So I'm kind of like right in the middle on here, like whether I'm actually going to do it or not. I probably won't. It'll probably just get replaced by other stuff that comes along because, things move so fast these days. I still haven't watched the 2nd season of Yellow Jackets. There's 1,000 things on my queue to watch. So, I don't know if this one happens.
It also doesn't really sound like Agatha is going to be the thing to break me out of my Marvel hibernation. I think I was kind of waiting on an Avengers movie probably to see if, or Thunderbolts maybe if that comes out first. I was waiting for a big movie here because just my Disney Plus burnout is pretty intense.
Well, I mean, they're going nuts next year. It's kind of a dumping field next year for Marvel on Disney Plus and in general. Like they're kind of like clearing out all the old projects that were finished before they decided to restructure what they were doing. So we're getting like the new Captain America, Thunderbolts, yes, the Ironheart TV show.
That's not going to be the one.
Yeah, like
Daredevil Born Again.
Daredevil, yes, that one. Daredevil's coming back. There's a lot. There's like 7 projects next year or something insane like that. I think the one they really need to hit is the Fantastic Four, and the rest can kind of just do whatever. But I don't know. They could swamp the market with bad ones, and we'll see. But yeah, I don't think you need to do Agatha. It is. I liked it. I'm glad I did it. But if you weren't like, I'm interested in that, no need. It's a Marvel version of Hocus Pocus. Let's be frank. So
if one of these other ones reignites my interest, then I might circle back to it actually, because it's the one of the ones I've started skipping that seems like it has the most going for it.
It's pretty painless. They're all like 40-minute episodes. That's nice. Yeah. They do a version of The Constant from Lost. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah, they just do The Constant as one episode. It's really good. Yeah.
But with Agatha and her witch
no, with one of the other witches, actually.
All right. Well, so we're still in the era of spinoffs and remakes for a while now.
Very much so. Yeah. All right. What's next on TV? Anything you're watching? Anything coming up that I don't know of anything?
Well, they have to release Andor season 2 eventually.
April. They said it's April.
Oh, is that coming out? Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's our next TV project. Well,
probably. Okay. All right. Thanks for talking and listening. Have a good day.